Welcome to The Buzz. We're going to have some fun, hear things you'll never hear anywhere else, and learn how to take 1 hour off your marathon PR. That may be an exaggeration, but I am Buzz Burrell, and we're going to have real conversations with the people who help define this amazing sport of running, which often feels like more than just a sport. So send me your questions and comments to buzz@ultrasignup.com so we can do this together. This is a production of UltraSignup. Thank you for joining me. This is Buzz Burrell. I hope you're enjoying The Buzz. And don't forget that UltraSignup has 2 other shows on its podcast network. Check out The Trailhead with Zoe Rome and Brendan Leonard, where they celebrate the quirks and culture of trail running as only those two can do. And Between Two Pines, our offbeat, laugh-out-loud show with Dom Grossman and Andy Pearson. And here's something new. Both The Buzz and The Trailhead are now on YouTube. So whether you want to listen on the run or watch from home, we've got you covered. Just search for UltraSignup on YouTube and hit subscribe. This episode is brought to you by Wahoo Kicker Run. Their sponsorship made this episode possible. Wahoo Kicker Run is a very high-end treadmill, a game changer for indoor training. It has run-free mode, so the belt automatically adjusts to your pace based on your position with no buttons or fuss. It's the closest thing to running outside without going outside. And you can train for running in the mountains, because the automatic grade control mimics real-world terrain, shifting from a negative 3% decline to a steep 15% incline. In case you're wondering, I am a big proponent of treadmill training. I personally go to the gym once or twice a week in the winter and during inclement weather, and treadmills are great for tempo runs, for uphills, and they help improve your running form. So check out the Wahoo Kicker Run at wahoofitness.com. So Jason, are you a famous runner who just finished a famous 100-mile trail race somewhere?
Absolutely not.
Well, okay no then. Are you a not-so-famous runner whose mother just died of cancer, so you're running across the USA to honor her memory and raise funds for Alzheimer's research?
Okay, I'll just say this right now. If anyone ever sees me running, just go ahead and call 911 because something is there's big trouble on the horizon. Probably join me in the direction that I'm running.
Jason Blevins, okay, fill us in. Who are you?
I am a journalist, been out here covering the Western Slope now for nearly 30 years, writing about public lands, mountain communities, all the fun stuff that we love up in the Colorado high country.
Excellent. So listeners, just to provide some context here, tens of thousands of people come to the Rocky Mountains to recreate and to run. A lot of the famous races are out here. And so what's going on behind the scenes? What's really the background? What's the economics? What's the culture? Jason Blevins has been doing this, writing about outdoor recreation for 29 years. That's a long time. The link in his LinkedIn comments, someone says, Jason is the consummate pro. He mind vacuums up everything in its polymath path, writes on everything, and the copy is crisp and concise. So, listeners, that's what we're going to get, because a compendium of Jason's articles would essentially comprise a history of outdoor recreation in Colorado. Okay, Jason, I think we've warmed him up now.
There we go.
So what's moving you? I want to just start off. I got some things on my mind that I want to learn more about, but is something really pressing you right now that's getting you going?
We're obviously locked into what is going to be maybe the second worst winter in 50 years. Really dismal conditions out there for skiing. So mountain towns are kind of struggling. We're seeing a bit of a, slowdown. This is maybe some bit of a correction from a pretty heated few years that we've had, and we're starting to see kind of a slowdown, and that's already been, that's going to be kind of accentuated even by this lack of snow and this dismal snowfall for this winter. And in many ways, we're seeing these mountain communities kind of reinventing themselves, coming coming back to themselves and reassessing their values, seeing where they want to be. Are they a second home community? Are they a tourist community? Are they an amenity community? Are they a combination of all these things? Are they a ski town? Do they rely too much on people riding chairlifts? Probably so. And I think what we're seeing is that diversification is starting to filter into winter. We've seen it for the summer. Communities of festivals and trails and biking and running and all the things they do, events and races. So fun. Winter has largely been pretty staid. Like, you don't want to have a lot of events in the winter because that's ski time. After a season like this, we're starting to see these communities kind of put their heads together and say, maybe we should be a little more diversified in the winter. Maybe a sole reliance on chairlift riders is not the best approach, especially when you're looking at a 20 to 30% decline in numbers and people coming in. I see a lot of excitement and kind of ingenuity and innovation bubbling up as these communities kind of, realign themselves. And you have to remember, if you look back in history, they were mining towns that weathered a, very sudden collapse in mining. Now, we're not going to see that sudden. This is going to be a long collapse in winter from what we're being warned. But this is, this is sort of a historical, return to Jesus sort of moment where everyone's kind of coming back to saying, what are we and what do we want to be and how can we get there?
Wow, Jason, that was brilliant. Thanks for that remarkable summary. And just so people get orientated here, so officially, the Colorado snowpack is at 61% of normal. It could be the worst snowpack since 1977. And this is a big deal. And so the interesting thing is, one is a runner or a biker, they're going, hey, this is great. But in other perspectives, the broader perspective, this is actually a disaster in slow motion because our water, it's not just economics, but our water comes from snowpack. And so, hello, if you're listening from Tucson and Phoenix, you might want to be paying attention to this because the tap might get turned off next year because the water isn't running into Lake Mead and Lake Powell and Central Arizona project where Arizona gets their water. They literally could turn off the tap.
This, and this is much bigger than a bad ski season. And we've really come to grips with that. And, January, that dry spell, we were saying, okay, we're going to have a pretty lean winter. And now come March, where we are in the same situation, we're saying, well, we could have a long, hot, smoky, dry summer with implications way downstream. 40 million people rely on the Colorado River. And if we don't have that thing rolling and we are already struggling to figure out how we're going to manage an over allocated supply of water with a growing population down in the lower basin with water we don't use enough of here in Colorado. We don't use our share and they want it down there. So lots of scary kind of things around water on the horizon there for sure.
Well, Jason, this is exciting to me. Hopefully the listeners find it interesting as well because it affects everyone. Like you said, 40 million people, because we're talking, you're based in Colorado, but let's just unpack this a little bit. The rivers, the Colorado, the San Juan, the Platte, the Arkansas, the Rio Grande River, which divides Texas from Mexico, they all come from Colorado. We're the highest state in the union by far. And we don't use up all our water. It goes downstream. California and Arizona is happy to have it, but at some point, what's the word? How can I still maintain our PG rating on Apple and Spotify and with the proper adjective? The SHIT is going to hit the fan at some point.
If not already happening. We've got these two basins. We've got a 105-year-old deal that is probably time to fix, and our use is built on hard numbers versus actual supply numbers. How much snowfall did we get? How much is, snowpack do we have? Let's allocate it from that. Nope. It's a hard number that was built with the Colorado River Compact. So we're facing a number of very bureaucratic, strict challenges, and the lack of agreement between the lower basin and the upper basin is something that is highly problematic as we try to figure out how we are going to divide up this water. And like you said, most, I think, except for a tiny little bit of the Green River that tucks into Colorado out in the Northwest, most every body of water, flowing water in Colorado leaves the state, right? It flows from up here and it goes down. And when we don't have much of it, that is something that many other states are going to feel.
Well, Jason, we are speaking with you from the Butte, sometimes known as Crested Butte, Colorado. And let's go back to something you said about what's happening to the mountain towns, the culture, the community, the economics, because Crested Butte was full on coal mining. I mean, these were all, I think, Slovenian coal miners. You look at the old names there. I mean, it's the history of Crested Butte was remarkable. Sure. And then, like you alluded to very briefly, they totally reinvented themselves as a ski town. And now your starter mansion is $2 million. It's come a long way since coal mining. And now, in a way, what you said, it's the come to Jesus moment, is a lot of these mountain towns are saying, how can we reinvent ourselves again?
And we are seeing that everywhere. And, in many ways, these mountain town communities way up in the mountains, we are, canaries in the coal mine for letting people see the impact of this warming climate. What does that mean? How do you react? How do you sustain an economy, a community, a population that is built around, we built this thing around snow and chairlifts, and now we're going to have to kind of figure out how we can make a living and how we can sustain a community without necessarily the snow that we're used to, especially if these warnings that are coming in are true. Like, we are facing a real, if this is the new normal, we've got issues and we need to figure it out now. And the mountain towns can be the model. We should be showing the rest of the country, one, how to get along politically without yelling at each other and calling each other names. And then two, how to actually work together and do stuff that's important to get it done, like actually get things done. And I think many of these mountain towns, we all are like-minded folks with a deep admiration and respect for our place, and we want to protect that place. At the same time, we want to, put a little money in our pocket and make sure that we can live here. So, I think we're going to have to figure out how to best balance those competing forces sometimes. And when we do figure it out, it will be the model for, if not the country, the rest of the world, for getting along and getting it done.
Well, spoken like a true mountain person, where getting along and getting it done is required just to live there at all. And we're not going to go in this direction, but I have to do a quick call out because, the little elephant in the room here is climate change. There's a reason that there's a snow drought, and the snow drought is compounded by the fact it's actually been really warm. And so the SWE, the snow water equivalent, which is really the most important number, is even lower than the snowpack, which is just the depth. And so there's a little political issue. We're going to leave that alone, except we have to call out Protect Our Winters, POW. Yeah. It's a nonprofit organization. And so join, Google it, support them if you ever get a chance. It's a good organization.
And these are the winners, Buzz, where, if you really think that climate change is a political issue, then you should probably look a little harder at the numbers, because I'm not taking a political stance here when I say that the past 13 out of 14 winters have been record warm. We are seeing warming temperatures. Snow is turning to rain. Twice this winter at Crested Butte, we had rain events. It rained to 12,800 feet, which is just preposterous, ridiculous, unheard of. We're, granted, we could be back to a nice, big, cold, bountiful winter next winter, but, we should all really start looking at these climate numbers without thinking, oh, this is weather, this is political, this is a hoax, this is whatever crazy people in DC say. When you're watching it happen outside your window and at your ski area, it's time to really look at the numbers a little harder. This is not a political issue. This is a existential issue.
Good point. For the mountain towns and the culture and the communities, and of course, if you happen to live at sea level, it's really an existential level issue for the 100 million people who are 1 meter above sea level right now. Yeah. And I'm going to do another call out. Come to think of it, here's my hat, Run Up for Air, RUFA. So I want to do a big plug for Run Up for Air. It's a series of 8 running, hiking races around the Rocky Mountains where you raise money for clean air, actually. Oh, nice. So Google that, and hopefully you'll come to a Run Up for Air event. They're super fun, and that was a flagrant plug, but I'm happy to do it. They're fun. If you come, you'll enjoy it. Well, Jason, let's bring this back to the community that you know quite a little bit about. And when we were getting warmed up on this topic, You said something to me I thought was just really fun because all along there's been this, what's the word? I can't think of it, the adjective. We want to preserve. We're all environmentalists. There's what the wildlife, the ecology, et cetera, et cetera. And also every town needs an industry. Without an industry, you got nothing. You got retirees. You got, people like me. You don't want to be around people like me. That'd just be terrible. And so there's been this interesting balance, but now maybe that is kind of opening up a little bit. So you said you're seeing some things here, and I'm going to quote you. Pardon me. This is from our phone conversation of last week. You said, for example, someone might propose, let's have a winter festival. And 5 years ago, you noted they would have been run out of town.
No.
Now people are saying, yeah, maybe we should.
And, I think that's emblematic of this shift for, say 5 years ago, heading into that weird pandemic, we were getting busier and busier and busier. And then 2021, boom, everybody moves to the mountain towns. They all realize, well, that's the place to be. Why would you not? How could you not recognize that? So a lot of people moved to town. They started working from home, bringing a lot of money. And then the tourists also came because the tourists recognized, wow, this is a great place to be. We don't have to go to movie theaters or all the stuff we can't do inside sporting events. So let's go to the mountains. And boy, did we feel some pressure in 21, 22. And now, that's ebbing, that's slowing down a little bit. We're starting to catch our breath. And, the sort of anger and concern that we were feeling in 21 and 22 saying, are we really a tourist town? Are you sure we need tourists? I think we can probably make a go without all these visitors. Why don't we just be our own little town? And everybody who lives here supports the town. And, it's a nice dream, but then you have a winter like this and you see declines in tourism and you start to realize, wow, those locals who go out once a month like me on my, for my restaurant budget are not going to keep a restaurant afloat. We're not going to support all of the nonprofits. I can give to a couple of them sort of thing, just a working folks. So you start to come around to realize, wow, we really do need our second homeowners. We really do need our tourists. And it's a season like this. It's going to be one of those kind of, return to the roots of what your town, the values that your town has. I'm not saying that you should become a complete tourist town, but it's the same thing that we saw in the 80s in Colorado, where the whole economy was anchored in oil, and oil goes south, everything collapses, the entire state is brought to its knees. That is not what we need. We need a 5-legged stool, not a 1-legged stool, and you need like all the different diversification things. So when one thing does slow down, like tourism, you can, have your second homeowners coming in saying, hey, I hope you're coming for Christmas vacation. We got a great play. We got dances. We got sleigh rides. We got all the things, sledding, and maybe the skiing's not the greatest, but we sure would love to have you. And they do come, and, you're starting to see it, maybe less angst over, the crowded Elk Avenue or the crowded Main Street in Breck or the busy, Vale pedestrian village. We're starting to come around to be like, this is great. I love all these people. This is fantastic. My neighbors are going to be able to stay here. They're not going to have to move. They're going to be able to keep their restaurant open. So, we're coming around to this new embrace. And in many ways, these sort of lean years are where we come back together and kind of huddle and realize, hey, we actually are a tourist town.
I like your positive attitude, and I like the way you've emphasized coming together. You've used that terminology numerous times, Jason. So I think everyone's noticing that. It's not a matter of beating the drum or us versus them in the slightest. It's the opposite. It's let's come together and figure out what works for all of us. And at the same time, noting that unless tourists come to some of these mountain towns, you got retirees.
Yeah.
And that's not an economy. You don't really want to live in that place because there isn't much happening.
And, but retirees are still an important component of your economy. That is one of the legs on the stool.
I appreciate the support on that one.
Yeah, you have to be there. You're an important component of a vibrant community. You don't want to be all retirees, obviously, and you don't want to be all tourists. So it's this mix, and we're starting to see these rural villages and these rural mountain towns really starting to to kind of find their balance with that mix. I think back of 2021 in Steamboat, Routt County Economic Development cheerleaders, very diverse economy up there. They had this projection, like, we want some work from homers. We need a more vibrant population of work from homers. It was a long-term goal. They had a 10-year goal, 20-year goal where they wanted this percentage of their residents and their economy to be coming from people who work from home. Boom. 2021 comes, they got it all. They hit that mark right there in a year. And then they're like, oh, wow, that is not the way we wanted to do it. So the speed and rapidity, how fast it all went down in 2021 left us a little shocked. And I think everybody in every mountain town was reeling. The key is to come out of that recovery with perspective that we took from, that the weirdest time in American history, without pulling all the levers and making all the changes that we can coming out of, the oddest 2 years in the history of the country, and making permanent changes based on that. So I think what we're seeing is a more methodical, sensible kind of look right now, while we were pretty hot and heavy and heated there coming out of the pandemic.
And this affects everybody, again, because like you said, we're kind of on the tip of the spear. So what we figure out on these issues is going to spread elsewhere, because these issues are pervasive, actually. I mean, I spend a lot of the summers in Michigan. We could be talking about South Haven, Traverse City, right, Saugatuck, where you have this extreme, labor shortages, where restaurants alternate nights that they're open because they have to use the same dishwashers and wait people. And of course, that happened in the mountain towns, and that's happening out west, and it's happening in New England and the Southeast. So I just want to let people know that we're not just talking about the Butte. You mentioned Routt County, Steamboat Springs and places like that. This is kind of pervasive. And should we talk about housing, or is that just kind of going down a rabbit hole? Because as you know, I think I could say that we had a certain liberal value system, anti-war, anti-racism, and anti-growth. And we thought that was brilliant. We thought the three-legged stool, that was just great. But anti-growth had repercussions that we did not expect, and that was housing went sky high. It blew up, turned into a political liability, and it turned into a real problem for environmentalism, because now all of a sudden people have to live somewhere else and drive in to work because there's no place to live within the community.
Exactly. And we saw in the 8 kind of busiest high country counties in Colorado, home prices doubled in a few years, and now that is a big, painful lurch forward. And on top of that, we'd spent 10 years really opposed to density. We did not like apartment complexes and mountain towns. It was sort of the apotheosis of the mountain idea.
Right.
And so, those two things came together to create a housing crisis, which created a working crisis. And, we did not have places for people to live. And now, we've seen 4 or 5 years now of hyper aggressive building for workforce housing out here in Gunny. We got huge project coming in Whetstone. Vail's got big projects. Fraser Valley has big projects all down the Western Slope, Grand Junction, Glenwood. Big apartment complexes are coming in, and we are addressing that housing issue. We're still creating these, sort of deed-restricted, affordable housing sort of things that are keeping the poor's poor, right? And there's an inherent frustration out in there, in that you're sleeping in a house that is maybe you're deed restricted. You got a good deal for it, but you're appreciating it 3%, the cap. Meanwhile, your neighbor is appreciating it 30%, and they're making $200,000 while they're sleeping every year, just because their house is going up in value. And that can engender a bit of frustration, right? Like, you're like, well, what the heck? Why am I, still grinding out service level job or whatever? And these richy riches keep getting wealthier. And that's something, the housing gap and the haves and have-nots are so evident in our mountain towns, right? Like, it's just so painfully right there in our faces every step we take. No, we go into town and you're like, man, I cannot believe that is a $5 million shack, and you're like, that is a $5 million shack. And you're like, and I've said this before, and sometimes
And
our
Jason, of course,
newsfigures.
I have to interject the $5 million
Sure.
shack. And I got a one-liner here, and I want to see if you can confirm or deny.
There you go.
I think I've observed that the bigger the house, the less number of people live in it.
Exactly. And the less often they are in there. But I mean, we're not able to afford a 10,000 square foot mansion for $30 million in Aspen, obviously. That's more money than I will make in my lifetime, than my children and I will make in our lifetime. But that is, if you have that house, chances are it's not your only house, and chances are you pretty much don't live there. And that could be frustration. Yeah. The bigger the house, the less likely it's occupied, and the fewer people that are in there. A 4-top in a 16-bedroom thing in Aspen that goes 200 feet into the ground or whatever, because they've got elevators down to bowling alleys and movie theaters and basketball courts.
And by the way, listeners, in case you think that Jason's just carrying on, everything he said is factually correct. I mean, there really are interior elevators that go down to bowling alleys below ground. So he's not just making that up. It is the dichotomy, the polarization, as you described, Jason, is times 5, but it exists everywhere else.
Sure.
And so it's sort of highlighted here. You called out Vail, Aspen, Crested Butte. You didn't mention Telluride, but same.
Sure.
And I'm out here in Moab. I'm downstream. I'm kind of looking right out there, and there's the Colorado River, and I could pretty much get across it without getting my chest wet. I could ford the Colorado River right now out of Moab. And they've done that 180 you described. They said, you know what? We're a tourist town, because they've gone through what you described. It's so interesting. This was uranium, right? No coal out here, but this was uranium mining. And it was supposedly, apocryphally, the richest county in the Rocky Mountains, which I don't think is true. But, during the uranium boom, things are booming. And then boom, done, over. Everyone gets laid off. It's over. River rafting came in. Yeah, let's raft the rivers. Of course, that's under threat right now. Sure. We didn't turn to skiing. We turned to mountain biking. And so we're reinventing ourselves as well. And I want to just call out Moab here a little bit. The affordable housing initiatives here have been quite dramatic. And one of the things they did is they legalized Airstreams in the backyard.
Sure.
I mean, you could tax the wealthy people, which I think taxes are a little questionable, and then try to give the money away. Or you can just let up a little, ease up a little bit and let people's own solutions have their way and let them try to figure it out. I think Moab has done a pretty good job of letting people make do.
Yeah. And, that it's that density argument. You should be able to, if you have a garage and you could throw an apartment on top of it, how awesome would that be to have a little rental income, as well as accommodating your workforce workers who need a place. So I think there's a lot of options there, and we tend to get in our own way in a lot of these western towns where, like you said, there is a very vibrant and lingering slow growth, no growth sort of mentality, and it's taken a while to sort of convince people that density is actually the answer that we need here. We need to have a place where we can put people up, and at least for their first couple of years, maybe they can get their feet under them. Maybe then they can go afford, a non-deed restricted condo, and then they'll move from that condo into, next thing you know, they're raising a family in a house, in a mountain town. It's entirely doable, and I think it's more about just shifting some, bureaucratic elements around and making room and ability for people to do that and grow in that way at their pace, and we're starting to see it.
And that's a major cultural shift, isn't it? Because, like you said, the no growth thing is, what's the word, endemic. It's kind of built into our culture. So the people who've been here for a while are going to fight this because they got theirs. And very interestingly, if you got your house of whatever value it is, and if there is no growth, you'll become wealthy. and then you say, well, I want to protect the neighborhood character and I want to protect the environment. But in reality, again, pardon me, I'm kind of going out here on a little bit of a limb. The facts of the matter is that will make the homeowner wealthy, and that's really the main thing that happens.
And, if we're going to go out on a limb, a lot of the people who show up at those city council meetings and say, we don't need this. Let's don't have this apartment complex. This is a bad idea. They're in a certain generational demographic. I don't want to insult any of you. I don't want to insult any of your listeners, but they're not youngsters, and they're saying, I don't really want that apartment complex next to my mansion that I bought 40 years ago for $30,000. And now it's worth $3 million. And I want to protect that. And, there's a reluctancy to let go of power and money that we're seeing across the American political and cultural spectrum that is really leaving a lot of younger generations, and I count myself as one of them. I'm Gen Xer, 56 years old, and we're just going to get skipped because the generation ahead of me decided they were going to hang on into their 90s and be president. You're like, wow, you should be deciding what your
podcaster.
There you go.
Right. Well, Jason, we lit it up there. I appreciate it, and it's a fun conversation. And what you just said actually has validity on both sides. So if a person has been in the Butte, Moab, wherever, Saugatuck, Michigan, Conway, New Hampshire, Asheville, North Carolina. They've been there for 20 years and they don't want the density because it disturbs their sense of place. That is a valid position. And so we understand this. They're not bad people in the slightest. That's a perfectly valid position. But it also means there will be consequences to that, which is the people who work there can't afford to live there. They're going to drive in. Driving has a certain environmental consequence itself. So it's a big question. And Jason, I'm glad that you're cognizant and you're able to elucidate people on what I think are kind of exciting issues.
Yeah, no. And, that's the fundamental thing that's going on in, mountain towns is the people who got here 20, 30 years ago, they're sitting pretty if they stuck around, but they also paid their dues. You talk to them, you're like, I slept in a garage. I slept in a van, then I moved into a garage, and then I had a tent in a living room, and then I moved, and you're like, we all have those stories, people that have lasted in ski towns, and that's part of the process. And, it's not like, you move right into a ski town as your freshman year and you get a house. Like that's not going to happen. You got to pay some dues and work through. And it all boils down to this idea that these mountain towns for a while there, they tried to be perfectly suitable for everyone. 100% of the people should have a great time when they visit your town. Now I have this theory that the best towns are the ones that are just shitty enough. It's pretty difficult to park. It's a pain to walk around on the sidewalk because they don't do the best job shoveling. It's not for 100% of the people. It's kind of a hard life. It's a little bit of a grind. You got to go do side jobs. You got to hustle. You got to shovel. You got to, go ski pal. You got to do all the things and work hard and make it happen. It's not just all unicorns and rainbows. And the communities are starting to find out, and I've given this before. I'm like, rip those flowers out of your roundabouts. Like, you don't need it to be that pretty, and you don't need a 24-hour rec center with a surf wave, like you can make some adjustments, to make yourself better reflect your natural environment, which is harsh and can be mean. And if you could do that, you can sort of self-regulate some of the numbers and some of the people that are coming into town. Say your, flatlanders will come in and they'll have a nice winter like this and they'll be like, this is the greatest place ever. And then next winter, we're 500 inches and all they do is shovel. And they're like, we are going back to Atlanta. This is ridiculous,
Well, Jason, I think you've missed your calling, or maybe you should add to your calling. You're an esteemed journalist, Colorado Sun, by the way, everyone, coloradosun.com. It's it's employee owned, isn't it?
We were launched by employees, by journalists, and now we're a nonprofit, but we're run by a nonprofit board that is all journalists.
Great. And okay, coloradosun.org, isn't it?
Nope, .com. We
.com.
started off as a public benefit corp, owned by the 10 reporters who left the Denver Post and created it. And we're sort of building a new model there with hopefully subscription-based model where everything is free.
Subscriber.
Yeah. Everything's free.
I'm calling out coloradosun.com. I'm on your newsletter. That's how we got the idea to call you up, is in fact. But Jason, you need to get on the op-ed page big time. I mean, you need to submit this stuff to the New York Times and kind of get those old fuddy-duddies going. Because I just heard, I'm quoting you right now. I want this to go viral if possible. The ideal town is just shitty enough.
Just shitty enough. Come on, we can do that. We can do that. It's entirely possible to make these towns. These can't be Disneyland. Your ski mountain's not Disneyland. Like, the natural environment is not Disneyland. You need responsibility. You need accountability. You need to go out there prepared, knowing what you're getting into with the plan and, yourself, you're all put together, well prepared. These places need to better reflect the environments they're in, and they cannot be 100% comfortable for 100% of the people.
Right. And you can start by taking out the petunias from the roundabouts, or the roundabouts entirely. I'm going to quote someone you've heard of, the author Heather Handsome. She's written a couple books that relate to this, the ski, but she wrote an entire book on ski bums.
Yeah.
And she said, I'll just read this. They loved this mountain and frolicked in the snow to their heart's content because they knew the rules of the civilized world beyond this mountain did not apply to them. It was a special time, a time when dishwashers were king.
Yeah. Heather is so gifted.
A time when dishwashers were king. Those were the good old days.
And, that's the mountain is the level playing field. We go out and we're all angry that we don't understand how somebody could be so rich they could buy a $30 million house, and how they fly on jets, and how they always seem to be having fun and eating out and all the things that we struggle to do, and work hard. And then we go up skiing and we're just sitting there on the same level playing field with them, and that it feels good, right? Like we've worked hard to get where we are, and we are going to ski right by you very quickly. And maybe giggle.
And maybe snicker. I've got another one that from Dolores LaChapelle.
Yes.
The original. Oh, you're just going, wow, yeah. I know. You mentioned the name, you kind of have to wipe tears out of my eyes. Ooh, okay, let me take a deep breath here. Powder skiing is not fun. It's life fully lived. Life lived in a blaze of reality.
That's my. That's where it all comes back to, and that's the one thing. If we're talking about ski towns kind of transitioning away from an over-reliance on skiing, but there's a very passionate population in these towns that we are here for proximity to soft snow. We do not want to get in a car and drive for 4 hours for a powder day. We are paying our dues and grinding it out and working hard and leaning way over our financial skis so that we can live in a town where we can jump out in 10 minutes and be on snow. And that's soft snow. And that is a primary driver of a lot of us here. That is why I'm here. It's why my wife's here. It's why we raised our kids in these towns. We are all about soft snow, and when we can get it, we're all about it. And that's where we're washing ourselves from all our woes and pain and angst, right?
And it's shifting over. I mean, I think I'm going to mention the word climbing, skiing, and trail running.
Sure.
There's simpatico here. These are soul sports, right? I mean, I run on roads, occasionally tracks, so that's all good. But somewhere in there, the trail runner isn't necessarily wearing a watch. They're bringing along a camera. Somewhere along there, they want to be in nature rather than get through nature as fast as possible. So I think there's some synchronicity here. the whole outdoor industry, which you're quite familiar with, Jason, is kind of pivoting overall. So we've talked about the mountain towns, how they're reinventing themselves. I presume you've probably gone to outdoor retailer for like
Of course.
25,
Yeah.
25 straight years. Outdoor retailer, by the way, is the giant trade show. Was in Salt Lake forever. It went to Denver. Now it's back in Salt Lake. And this is, a big deal. I'm just going to give you a quick number. Nationwide, outdoor recreation, the U.S. is $1.3 million a year. This is
Trillion.
huge.
Trillion.
Wow.
Yeah, that's with a
Thank
T.
you for being a good journalist.
They love that word. Trillion.
Because the trillion. Because the Colorado number is 18.1 billion.
Correct.
Dollars per year just in Colorado. And so how is this changing? Well, this is interesting because you used to go to OR, pick up a magazine, and there was, Conrad Anchor, sponsored by the North Face, trying to climb Mount Everest or trying to climb Denali or something. But these companies, the whole sport, the whole industry is realizing these are one-off. This is a once a year,
Right.
Trail running is a 3 or 4 times a week. And so the frequency means, pardon me, but the dollar signs are going ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching.
Sure.
And so now you're seeing these big companies pivot very quickly into trail running. And so long-term trail runners are going, right? So is this good? If you're a professional, it's really good. It's a paycheck. I mean, a professional trail runner is over 50K a year, maybe 100K. If you're the everybody else, you're going, what's in it for me? Why do I care? So I'm just putting it on the table. The outdoor industry is now saying trail running is actually very viable because snow might not be a thing, and climbing a mountain once a year, who cares? But you can go trail running all the time.
Sure. And, I think that's reflective of the sort of maturation of the entire industry. We've seen this used to be, your Conrad Anchor, your climber, and your top skier and your top snowboarder and all the people. And they were the professionals of the outdoor recon world. Now we have master's programs with outdoor recreation emphasis that blends, public lands policy with evolutionary biological science. And then you have, it's these numbers that are coming out of the BEA that show $1.3 trillion prove that this is a real industry that's as big as energy. It's as big as utilities. It's as big as pharmacological industry. So, I mean, this is a real thing. And for the past 30 years, it's been what you do on the weekend, and your real job is in an office and accounting and all the things. This is actually emerging as not just play, but an industry. And it's not just an industry, it's a rural economic engine for these small towns. Vibrant engine, trails everywhere, ski lifts, all the things like water, kayaking, everything from hiking to hard stuff to easy stuff, just getting outside. And it is an answer to our screen problem, our obesity problem, our problems that we have with where we're just not as healthy as we could be. And if we were outside getting a run on or a ski or a skin or, paddle, whatever we do, where chances are we're taking a decent care of our bodies and probably going to save a bunch of money down the line on some medical stuff. So, there's a lot of real good opportunity in outdoor recreation as this industry matures away from that. Oh, that's what you do on the weekends. And you're like, no, actually, this is an established, very huge economic engine, and we deserve a table or deserve a seat at the table when it comes to making decisions about public policy on public lands. We should have recreation should be right there with the logging company and the mining company and the utility company and everybody that wants a piece of public lands. Recreation should be sitting at the table as an equal with all those. And it's happening. It's slower than you would want it to be, but it is happening. And that, that idea that trail running is, becoming an established, known economic engine, that is just one more sign that this industry is maturing and reaching its, not middle age, but say it's adolescence. It's not an infant anymore. We're not at the kids' table. We are at the grown-ups table, and it's time to start listening to outdoor recreation as not just a side thing, but it's a thing that's real, and we should be, treating it as such, the same way we give deference to, the mining companies, the logging companies, the electric companies, all the different people that want a piece of our public lands.
$1.3 trillion is larger than the country's agriculture or extractive industry or utility. So that's for real. Thank you for calling that out. And I'm going to kind of go a little bit below that and say runners step up. Because what Jason just said, look at those numbers. We deserve a seat at the table. And not only that, we have to have a seat at the table. Because in case no one has noticed, all our races are on public land. These don't take place on private land. So, hello. This is very important, not only to have the seat at the table, which we deserve, as Jason has noted, but that we push and put ourselves at that table. So always support runners for public land, protect our winters, run up for air, because we have to step up as a sport, in my opinion, and not be, as Jason said, weekend warriors. Let's integrate this. Once in the mountain towns, dishwashers were kings. And now, I think it's coming back around. It's coming back around, as you said, Jason, to another type of integration where it's more holistic and it's more sustainable.
Yeah. And it's important. What you just said is important. We all need to recognize our role under this umbrella. And for a lot of years, we were runners or bike riders or skiers or hunters or anglers or motorcycle riders or side by side, all the things. And what the industry is doing right now is working very hard to be like, okay, it's time to take a peek out of our silos and see that we all have these great appreciations for natural places. Some of us like to run, some of us like to pedal, some of us like to paddle, some like to ski, some want a wilderness experience, some want urban trails, some want, like all the different things. But we all have these core shared values, which are anchored in place in a most of us is a particular place, but it's outside, it's in the woods, it's in the mountains, it's with a view, it's dirt trails, it's all the things. And I think we all play a role there. It's not just Buzz, it's not just Jason, it's not talking heads on a podcast. It's every single person. When you're out there and you're seeing somebody running and that the weather's about to get bad because you are an expert and you have all your stuff on your phone, you probably should tell that person, be like, hey, we got crazy weather coming in. Or you go out and you're skiing and you see somebody wearing their helmet backwards. You don't take a picture of them and put it on the internet. You go up and whisper to them real politely and be like, hey man, I think that helmet goes the other way. We all carry a little water in this industry to grow it, make sure everybody else is having as good a time as possible, help them carry their skis from a parking lot or whatever it is you can do. When you see somebody who is sticking their toe in the water in our great world of the outdoors, let's make sure that their first experiences are good, and don't be the person that teases them or makes fun of them or, I think we all carry a responsibility, runners, everybody. And we could really switch this industry around and become the model. Remember what I was saying about us being a model? The outdoor industry could be a model for bringing everybody together. I have this theory when you go back and you're looking at what is one of the greatest movements in the history of America. And, you look back and in the 1970s, now I'm going to say this, and I'm not going to talk about where it went. I'm going to talk about how it started. But the Jesus movement in the 70s, it had everybody. It had rich people. It had poor people. It had everyone coming together. And they were all about love and respect and being nice to each other and do unto others and all the great things. And they look at what they did. We could argue about where it ended up, but that was an incredible movement that was just as broad as possible. Every single person that came and knocked on that door was embraced and welcomed in a with love. And if we could do that for the outdoors, we could create a movement that would be as big as a political movement right now. It's possible.
Right.
And I think we can all adopt that sort of openness and an embrace of everyone and be like, this is a great, sport. Everybody should spend time outside. And if we do, think of how awesome our society would be.
Right. Jason, what a brilliant prognosis. Because right now, of course, we're, by the way, recording this in early March in case anyone's wondering about those 61% of snowpack. I mean, by the time the podcast come out, it might be a little bit different than that. And there's this so-called war in Iran taking place right now. Times are really weird. And you have a very positive outlook here, which is it's a big tent. Let's get in it.
Tent.
And let's not go, oh, yeah. Let's go, hey, we're all in it together. We all like the outdoors. And this is a unifying principle that has science and medical health firmly behind it, culture firmly behind it, and probably your ability to run that next race is also impacted by this. So let's all pull together.
Let's do it. Stewardship, conservation, all these values can happen when we all spend time outside. It's hard to spend a lot of time in public lands and not develop a fondness for the beauty and pristine, nature that we have right out our doorsteps. And we can foster that next generation of people who are going to vote to support public lands, and get out there and be the next advocates. There's back to that sort of this generational thing where people are reluctant to let go. We need to be having a lot more young people guiding us and teaching us right now. We need to follow their ways, and we need to shepherd them and mentor them and bring them up and help them find all the different cool ways to be outside so that we know that we're handing this off to a very passionate, stewardship-minded, conservation-minded, protection of our natural resources-minded kind of people. And it's not going to happen if we all just want to keep our own little powder stash and not tell anybody about it.
Little powder stash.
Yeah.
And in terms of that welcoming message that you delivered so eloquently, I'm just going to add on, if I may, and this, in my opinion, goes especially true to females, because right now the numbers are, a little bit of discrepancy there. On the roads, they're not very equal, but particularly in ultramarathons, much less female. And I'll definitely call out people of color. I mean, there's someone out there
exactly
who's not Caucasian. It's a welcome. I mean, I literally do this in Moab. I see a black person, I just say, good to see you. And they might go, what do you mean by that? But I'm happy to say stuff like that because, like you said, it's a big tent. We want to make it as big as possible.
Yep. And we need urban, rural, all of it. We need people of color. We need every single human to recognize how awesome it is to get outside and play.
Well, Jason, as we wrap this up, I could say your tip for what is your recommendation for the least shitty town, but I'm not going to do that because you don't want to answer that. That'd be a very, very poor form of me.
Nope.
And you'd tell me, Washington, D.C., or, you're going to do a fake out. I can see this one. So why bother? But I really did like that quote, and we'll all keep our eye out for that one, I think.
Yeah.
But I would like to ask you. So April comes. What are you going to be writing about? I mean, this is really out on the limb. What's the next Jason Blevins story, or what's going to move you next? What should we be looking out for?
We will be watching how this winter unfolds. Fingers crossed for a magical, monsoon season that kind of keeps our fires at bay. Colorado Sun is, we cover a lot of stuff. Western Slope. Again, I'm always watching sort of the economic development in rural communities out here as we sort of stake out new identities and reaffirm our traditional values. It's an interesting time. And again, I hope to always have something semi-inspiring in the Colorado Sun to keep us a little bit, perked up while because I have the same apps on my phone that I click, the national news apps, and boy, that is just a really quite a deluge of bad news. And I like to think that sometimes on the Colorado Sun we can counter that with something that gives you a little bit of optimism, maybe provides you with some sort of solution, an idea on a way to make things a little better, ways that you can play a role. And that's something that we always try to think about here at the Colorado Sun is helping us recognize our common values, our shared appreciation for where we are and each other. And hopefully we can, like I said, be the model that we need to be to put the whole country, whole world back on track. We can do it. I know we can.
Jason, I got nothing else to say. That was brilliant. I'll keep that in mind, and I hope everyone else does and has been as inspired by you as I have been.
Yeah, thanks, Buzz. This has been fun.
Thank you for joining me. I feel like I'm with all my friends. This is Buzz Burrell, and I'll be back 2 weeks from today, delivering more thoughts you've probably never heard before. This podcast is a production of UltraSignup and releases every other Tuesday, alternating with The Trailhead with Zoe Rome and Brendan Leonard. If you've enjoyed this, please subscribe and click that button that says 5 stars, because that helps other people find this.